"Open that bag, Marta," Ernesto Valdivia ordered. Just as she crossed the gate of the rural school, her apron stained with flour and smoke. Marta Salcedo pressed the cloth bag to her chest, but the knot slipped between her hands, burned by years over the stove. The bread fell first, rolling across the dusty yard. Then came cold tortillas, a small bundle of rice, and the full shame of a woman who had never raised her voice, not even to defend herself before anyone in that village. The parents stopped talking. The children froze beside the wire fence. Ernesto picked up one loaf from the ground like evidence and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "This is called stealing from the school." Marta opened her mouth, but no words came. She felt every stare on her old clothes, her worn shoes, her poor widowhood. Someone whispered, "Thief," and the word spread faster than the dry wind between the empty classrooms, cutting through the silent patio. Then Marta saw Lucia at the back of the yard, hiding behind the older teacher, her face pale and her braids coming loose. The girl stared at the bread as if it were her only meal, trembling with fear. Marta understood that one explanation could save her name, but destroy the child's in front of everyone. She lowered her eyes and stayed silent. In the dust, beside a broken roll, lay a folded, grease-stained note written in blue, childish letters. For Lucia, after class. As dusk fell, Marta walked down the dirt path toward the dry riverbed, far from the eyes of the school and the whispers still burning behind her back. She no longer carried the bread from the yard, because Ernesto had taken it as if it were evidence. But beneath her shawl she hid 2 tortillas, a bruised orange and a small handful of rice saved before closing the kitchen. Each step hurt, not from exhaustion, but from the word following her. Thief, thief, thief. Lucia's little house stood beside a few mesquite trees, with a tin roof and an old curtain instead of a door. Marta knocked softly, as if asking permission not to hurt anyone. The girl appeared with swollen eyes and her hands pressed against her dress. "I can't take any more, Doña Marta," she whispered. "If the director finds out, everyone will point at me." From inside came her mother's weak cough. Marta left the food on a broken chair and ignored the empty plate on the dirt floor. Lucia lowered her head in shame and gently pushed the food back as if hunger itself could be returned. Marta knelt in front of her and fixed one loose braid with painful tenderness. "It was not for me, my child," she said softly. "That is why I said nothing. Some shames an adult can carry, but a little girl should never carry them before the whole school." Lucia looked at the bag and understood that Marta had chosen to lose her name before giving away hers forever. The next morning, Marta arrived before dawn, as she always did, but found the kitchen door shut with a new padlock. Ernesto waited by the corridor, wearing the same pressed shirt, the key held in his hand. "Until this is cleared up, you are not going in," he said, without looking at her directly. Marta pulled the old key from her pocket, worn smooth by years of use, and placed it on a bench. The children watched her pass without her apron, and the silence hurt more than any insult. In the yard, the mothers whispered as Marta walked away. One father said someone had finally brought order. Ernesto moved between the classrooms with a satisfied seriousness, as if he had saved the school from danger. But Doña Teresa was not watching the director. She was watching Lucia. The girl did not run at recess, bought nothing at the little snack stand, and hid her hands beneath her skirt when her stomach sounded. Each time someone said bread, she lowered her head. After classes, Doña Teresa entered the empty kitchen to look for old lists. On a shelf, she found the notebook where Marta had written the daily portions: rice, beans, leftover bread, bruised fruit. At the bottom of several pages, in shaky handwriting, there were small amounts subtracted from her own pay, and beside a recent date, one line did not look like theft at all, but care. Bought 8 bread rolls for the children who arrive without breakfast, without naming anyone. Before the sun rose, Marta returned to Lucia's house with a small pot wrapped in a blanket. The cloth door moved in the cold air, and inside it smelled of cheap medicine and damp firewood. The girl's mother lay on a low mattress, her forehead wet and her breathing short. Lucia swept the dirt floor, pretending everything was normal, but her eyes kept following the pot, as if hunger hurt more than shame and the pride of a poor little girl. "I don't want people to pity me," Lucia said, gripping the broom handle. Marta did not answer right away. She served a little rice, broke a tortilla in half, and carried the plate to the mother's bed. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a blue hair ribbon, the same one that had fallen among the bread in the schoolyard. Lucia looked at it and began to cry in silence. She was not crying for the food, but because someone had seen her need without turning it into cruel gossip. Marta sat beside her and wiped a tear from her cheek with the edge of her shawl. "When hunger walks through the door, shame sits at the table," she whispered. "But I did not come to expose you. I came so tomorrow you can study with a calm stomach." Outside, a neighbor leaned in from the road, curious. Marta covered the pot with her body, as if protecting something sacred, and Lucia understood that this woman had accepted humiliation so no one would stare at her. Ernesto called Marta into his office and placed the kitchen key on the desk, far from her hands. "If you want to avoid more shame, sign that you took food without permission," he said, pushing a blank sheet toward her. Marta looked at the paper, then at her burned fingers, still carrying the smell of smoke. She did not sign. Outside, Lucia waited by the door with her eyes lowered. When Ernesto saw her, he warned that no one at school should invent stories to protect such a poor woman. Doña Teresa did not believe him. That afternoon, she walked to Don Ramon's store, where Marta bought salt, candles, and bread when the dining room ran short. The shopkeeper opened a box of folded receipts. On several was the same name, Marta Salcedo. Bread rolls, milk, rice, ripe fruit, all paid in cash, sometimes with small coins. Teresa felt anger rise when she saw the date. The same day they had called Marta a thief in front of everyone. The following Monday, Ernesto gathered parents and teachers in the yard to close the matter before the rumor grew. He said discipline protected the children and that the school could not allow bad examples. Marta stood at the back, without her apron, silent and undefended. Then Doña Teresa walked between the benches with a folder pressed to her chest. She placed it on the director's table and said, "Before you judge her again, look at this, page by page, right here." Doña Teresa opened the folder without raising her voice. First she showed Don Ramon's receipts, with dates and prices written by hand. Then she placed the kitchen notebook on the table. Every portion was recorded, every leftover marked: hard bread, bruised fruit, cold rice. "This did not come from the children's mouths," she said. "It was food that would be thrown away, and when it was not enough, Marta bought more with her own wages, coin by coin, without applause or favors." The courtyard went still. Ernesto took one receipt, looked at it closely, and no longer knew where to put his eyes. A mother who had whispered against Marta covered her mouth. The students looked at the cook as if seeing her for the first time after years of quiet service. Marta stood at the back, hands folded over her dress, more tired than proud. Then Lucia stepped out from behind a bench and walked to the table, clutching the blue ribbon in her fist before everyone. "She did not steal," the girl said, her voice so small that everyone had to be silent to hear it. "She gave me bread so I would not faint in class, and so my mother could eat something too. I asked her not to say my name because I was ashamed." Marta closed her eyes when she heard her. No one clapped, no one spoke. Only the wind moved the papers on the table. And in that silence, everyone understood they had called mercy by the name of theft and had almost crushed it. The next day, Marta returned to the school without asking permission to walk through the main gate. She wore her apron washed, but still worn, her hands marked with small burns. Ernesto waited in the yard with the kitchen key between his fingers. This time, he did not raise his voice. In front of parents, students, and teachers, he lowered his head and said he had been wrong to accuse her without listening. Then he placed the key in Marta's palm, returning more than metal. Marta took the key without smiling, because dignity does not always make noise. She looked at Lucia, standing beside her mother wrapped in a light shawl, then at the children who had once gone to class, hiding their hunger. Sister Elena, from the parish, set a long table under the corridor. On it were bread, fruit, milk, and a new notebook. It did not say charity. It said, "Common table for anyone who arrives without breakfast. No questions, no shame." From that day on, no one called Marta Salcedo a thief again. Some apologized with awkward words, others did it by helping fill the table every Monday. Ernesto signed a public notice making it clear that Marta had never stolen from the school. She kept no bitterness. She only lit the stove, broke the first bread and placed it in the center where everyone could see it. It was a simple promise. No child in that school would ever hide hunger in silence again.